I sit in my living room, staring at the framed photographs lined up on Harold's old mahogany mantel. Lucas at 6 months, his chubby hands reaching toward the camera. Lucas at 2, chocolate smeared across his grin. Lucas at 3, wearing the dinosaur costume I bought him last Halloween. Each photo captures a moment when my world felt complete again. The house feels too quiet now. After Harold passed 3 years ago, I thought I'd never feel whole again. 42 years of marriage don't just end. They leave an echo that bounces off empty walls and settles into the spaces where laughter used to live. But then Lucas came along, and suddenly I had a reason to wake up excited again. I remember the day Sophie went into labor like it was yesterday, though it was 18 months ago now. Ryan called me at 6:30 in the morning, his voice shaking with excitement and terror. "Mom, it's time. We're heading to Columbus General." I threw on the first clothes I could find and drove through Columbus traffic like a woman possessed. In the hospital waiting room, I paced the industrial carpet until Ryan emerged, tears streaming down his face. "It's a boy. Mom. Lucas James Whitmore. He's perfect." When I first held my grandson, something shifted inside my chest. He had Ryan's stubborn chin and Sophie's dark, intelligent eyes. His tiny fingers wrapped around mine with surprising strength, and I whispered, "Hello, sweet boy. I'm your Grandma Maggie." Those early months were golden. Sophie returned to her nursing job at Cincinnati Children's Hospital when Lucas was 12 weeks old, and I eagerly volunteered to babysit twice a week. Tuesdays and Thursdays became the highlights of my week. I'd arrive at their suburban Westerville home with my diaper bag fully stocked and my heart full of plans. Lucas and I had our routines. Story time in the rocking chair that used to be mine when Ryan was little. Afternoon walks around the neighborhood where he'd point at every dog and squeal with delight. And our special baking sessions, I taught him to help measure flour for my famous snickerdoodles, even though more ingredients ended up on the floor than in the bowl. "Grandma Maggie's here," became his favorite announcement. Every Tuesday and Thursday, he'd run to the front window when he heard my Honda Civic pull into the driveway. The pure joy on his face when I walked through that door made every lonely evening in my empty house worthwhile. Sunday dinners at Ryan and Sophie's became sacred. We'd gather around their dining room table, the one I'd helped them pick out at Ashley Furniture, and I'd watch Lucas discover new foods, new words, new ways to make us all laugh. Sophie would serve her carefully planned meals while I secretly slipped Lucas extra rolls when she wasn't looking. He'd giggle conspiratorially, and I'd wink back. I threw myself into being the best grandmother possible. Target became my second home as I researched age-appropriate toys online and then searched the aisles for educational options. I subscribed to parenting magazines and watched YouTube videos about child development. For Lucas's first birthday, I planned an elaborate dinosaur party with decorations I'd ordered from 3 different websites. Looking back now, I can see the warning signs I missed. Sophie's smiles during my visits were always polite, but sometimes they seemed strained around the edges. When I offered advice about Lucas's eating habits or sleep schedule, Ryan would gently change the subject. When I suggested Sophie might be working too many hours at the hospital, she'd excuse herself to do laundry or clean the kitchen. But in those golden days, I was too happy to pay attention to the undercurrents. Lucas was thriving. Ryan seemed grateful for my help, and I felt useful again. I had found my purpose in this little boy who called my name with such joy. The last perfect Sunday dinner happened 3 months ago. Lucas had been fussy during the meal, overtired from a busy day at preschool. After dinner, he climbed into my lap while we watched Bluey on their living room couch. His warm little body relaxed against mine as his breathing grew slow and steady. Sophie and Ryan cleaned up in the kitchen, their quiet conversation mixing with the cartoon's cheerful music. Sitting there with my sleeping grandson, I felt the kind of peace I hadn't experienced since Harold died. This was what I was meant to do. This was how I could still matter. Lucas needed me, and I needed him right back. I had no idea that within 3 months, that need would nearly destroy us all. The trouble started slowly, like a hairline crack in a foundation that you don't notice until the whole structure starts to shift. Looking back, I can trace it to last Thanksgiving, though I didn't understand what was happening at the time. I arrived at Ryan and the Sophie's house early that Thursday morning, arms full of side dishes I'd prepared the night before. "I thought I'd help with the cooking," I announced cheerfully, setting my casserole dishes on their granite countertop. Sophie was already in the kitchen, wearing an apron over her favorite burgundy dress. She'd clearly been up early, preparing the turkey and organizing her menu. "Oh, Maggie, you didn't need to bring so much. I have everything planned." But I was already unpacking my green bean casserole, my stuffing, my cranberry sauce. "Nonsense. You work so hard all week. Let me take care of some things." Before she could respond, I was rearranging her refrigerator to make room for my dishes and adjusting the oven temperature for my cornbread. I noticed Sophie step back, her hands falling to her sides. At the time, I thought she looked relieved. Now I realize she looked defeated. When she pulled a store-bought pumpkin pie from a Kroger bag, I couldn't help myself. "Oh, Sophie, you bought a pie, but Lucas deserves homemade for Thanksgiving. Don't you think I could whip one up in no time?" I didn't have time to make one from scratch," she said quietly. "My shift ran late last night." "Of course you didn't," I said, already reaching for her mixing bowls. "That's what I'm here for." During dinner, I watched Lucas pick at his vegetables. "Come on, sweetie," I encouraged. "One more bite of green beans." When Sophie reminded him about their 3-bite rule, I added another spoonful to his plate. Growing boys need extra vegetables. Right, Lucas? I gave him seconds on mashed potatoes despite Sophie's gentle no-seconds rule, and when he asked for more cranberry sauce, I gladly obliged. "It's Thanksgiving." I laughed when Sophie raised an eyebrow. "Let him enjoy himself." Lucas grinned at me across the table, cranberry sauce smeared on his cheek. "Grandma lets me have more," he announced proudly. I caught Sophie's expression, then a flash of something I couldn't quite identify. Frustration, hurt. But it was gone so quickly, I convinced myself I'd imagined it. The Halloween incident should have been a clearer warning. I'd been shopping at Pottery Barn Kids when I spotted the most adorable dinosaur costume. It was expensive, $75, but Lucas was obsessed with dinosaurs, and I wanted him to have the best. I bought it without thinking to check with Sophie first. When I arrived at their house with the elaborate costume, complete with sound effects and realistic details, Lucas squealed with delight. Sophie appeared from the kitchen, holding a much simpler truck costume from Amazon. "Oh, Maggie," she said, looking between the two costumes. "I already bought Lucas's Halloween costume. But this one is so much better quality," I insisted, helping Lucas try on the dinosaur suit. "Look how his eyes light up." "And the other kids will be so impressed." Sophie held the truck costume limply in her hands. I thought, he said he wanted to be a truck. "Kids change their minds," I said dismissively. "This dinosaur costume is educational too. He can learn about paleontology." Lucas wore my costume to his preschool Halloween party. I felt vindicated when the other parents complimented how realistic it looked. I didn't notice that Sophie seemed embarrassed when another mother asked where she'd found such an expensive costume, or that she barely spoke during the school celebration. But it was December, when everything started to unravel completely. Sophie had picked up an extra shift at the hospital, something about being short-staffed during flu season, and asked me to keep Lucas until 6 instead of my usual 4 o'clock pickup. Lucas and I were having such a wonderful time. We'd built an elaborate train track across my living room floor, and he was so engaged, so happy, that when 6 o'clock came and went, I couldn't bear to pack up our game. "Just a little longer," I told him, Mommy won't mind if we finish this track. When Sophie arrived at 7:30, she looked exhausted, still in her scrubs, her hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. She stood in my doorway with an expression I'd never seen before. "Where's Lucas?" she asked, her voice tight. "In the living room, sweetheart. I went to your house first," she interrupted. When no one answered, I panicked. I thought something had happened. "Oh, Sophie, I'm sorry. We were having so much fun that Maggie, you can't just change plans without asking." Her voice was controlled, but I could hear the strain underneath. I was worried sick. I felt defensive immediately. "I was doing you a favor. I thought you'd be grateful for the extra time." "After working a 12-hour shift, wouldn't you want a break?" Sophie closed her eyes for a moment. When she opened them, something had shifted. "I need you to call me if plans change. Always." I agreed, but I felt hurt and confused. Wasn't I helping? Wasn't I making her life easier? Christmas Day was when everything fell apart completely. I arrived at their house with presents and my usual enthusiasm, determined to make the day special for Lucas. Among my gifts was a tablet I'd researched extensively, educational games, parenting-approved content, the works. I'd spent hours at Best Buy making sure it was perfect. When Lucas opened it, his eyes went wide. "Wow, my own computer." Sophie's smile faltered. "Maggie, we talked about this. We don't want Lucas having screen time until he's older." "Oh, Sophie, don't be so rigid," I said, already helping Lucas figure out how to turn it on. "He's just a child. Let him have some fun. It's Christmas." While Sophie was in the kitchen preparing our Christmas dinner, I set up the tablet with some educational games. Lucas was delighted, his little fingers quickly learning to swipe and tap. We played a counting game, a color-matching puzzle, and a simple dinosaur identification app. "This is so cool. Grandma Maggie," he whispered conspiratorially, "can we play the dinosaur game again?" When Sophie returned and found us huddled over the glowing screen, her face went white. "Maggie, we talked about this." "It's educational," I protested. "Look, he's learning his numbers." "That's not the point." Sophie's voice was quiet, but there was steel underneath. "We made a decision as his parents. You're undermining that decision." Ryan appeared from the kitchen, tea towel in hand. "Mom, maybe we should respect Sophie's rules about screens." I felt ganged up on, misunderstood. "I'm trying to give him experiences, to teach him things." When did that become wrong? The silence that followed was deafening. Lucas, sensing the tension, looked between the adults with confused eyes. "Are you mad at Grandma Maggie?" "No, sweetheart," Sophie said gently. But she took the tablet from his hands. "We're just having a grown-up conversation." The rest of Christmas Day passed in polite, strained conversation. I left earlier than usual, confused and hurt. As I drove through the quiet Columbus streets, past houses glowing with Christmas lights, I couldn't understand what I'd done wrong. I was trying to be a good grandmother. I was trying to give Lucas everything he deserved. Why couldn't Sophie see that? Why was she being so controlling? So rigid about every little thing? I had no idea that in just 3 weeks, my relationship with Lucas would be severed completely, and I would finally understand that love without respect isn't love at all. It's something much more dangerous. January 15th started like any other Tuesday. I woke up early, excited for my day with Lucas. The coffee pot gurgled to life while I planned our activities: story time, a nature walk if the weather held, and maybe some simple cooking. I'd been teaching him to help make grilled cheese sandwiches, and he loved being my sous chef. I had just pulled a fresh batch of chocolate chip cookies from the oven when the phone rang. Sophie's name appeared on my caller ID, and I smiled as I answered. "Good morning, Sophie. I was just getting ready to head over. Is Lucas excited for our cooking lesson?" There was a pause. Then Sophie's voice, calm and professional, her nurse voice. I would later realize, "Maggie, I need to talk to you about our arrangement." Something in her tone made my stomach drop. "Is everything all right? Is Lucas sick?" "No, he's fine. But I've found alternative childcare. Mrs. Chen from down the street will watch him on Tuesdays and Thursdays." I sank into my kitchen chair, phone pressed against my ear. I don't understand. Did I do something wrong?" "I think it's best if we take a break from the regular visits." The words hit me like a physical blow. A break? What kind of break for how long? "I'm not sure yet." Sophie's voice remained maddeningly calm. "We need some time to figure things out." My mind raced. "If this is about Christmas, about the tablet, I can return it. I'll follow whatever rules you want. Please, Sophie, don't—" "This isn't about one incident, Maggie. This is about patterns, about respect. Respect. I've done nothing but love that little boy. I've helped you. I know you love Lucas, but love and respect aren't the same thing." I felt like I was drowning. "What about Sunday dinners? Can I still see him then?" Another pause. "I think we need a complete break for now." The room started spinning. "You can't keep him from me. I'm his grandmother." "I'm not keeping him from you permanently, but right now, this is what our family needs." And after Sophie hung up, I sat at my kitchen table, staring at the plate of cookies that would never be eaten, trying to process what had just happened. The house felt impossibly quiet. On the refrigerator, Lucas's latest artwork, a crayon drawing of our family, seemed to mock me from behind its magnet. I called Patty McDonnell immediately. "She's keeping my grandson from me." I sobbed into the phone. "After everything I've done for that family, how can she be so cruel?" Patty listened patiently as I recounted the conversation, my words tumbling over each other in my distress. When I finished, there was a long silence. "Oh, honey," Patty said gently, "I'm so sorry you're hurting." "You don't think she's right, do you? I haven't done anything wrong. I've been nothing but helpful." Another pause. "Maggie, I think there might be more to this story than you're seeing right now." But I wasn't ready to hear that. I was too angry, too hurt, too confused. Ryan called that evening, his voice tired and strained. "Mom, I heard about the conversation with Sophie. Thank God. You can talk sense into her. Can't you? This is ridiculous." "Mom," he sighed deeply. "Sophie feels like you don't respect her parenting choices." "That's absurd. I raised you just fine. Didn't I?" "That's not the point. Mom, this isn't about your parenting 30 years ago. This is about Lucas now, and Sophie is his mother. I'm his grandmother. I have rights. You have the right to be in his life, but not to undermine his parents." I felt like my own son was betraying me. "So you're taking her side." "There are no sides. Mom, there's just our family, and right now, it's broken." That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, my mind replaying every interaction with Sophie, every moment with Lucas. I couldn't understand what I'd done that was so terrible. I loved that little boy more than life itself. I'd given up my retirement plans to help with childcare. I'd spent my savings on toys and clothes and experiences for him. How could loving him too much be wrong? I whispered into the darkness. "Grandma's going to fix this, sweetheart. Somehow, Grandma's going to fix this." But deep down, I was beginning to suspect that I was the thing that needed fixing. And I had no idea how to even begin. The first week without Lucas felt like wandering through a house where all the furniture had been rearranged in the dark. I kept forgetting that Tuesday and Thursday were no longer my babysitting days. I'd wake up excited, plan activities, even start preparing snacks before reality crashed over me again. By Wednesday of that first week, I couldn't stand it anymore. I loaded my car with Lucas's favorite books, the ones we'd read together during our Tuesday sessions, and drove to Sophie's house. I had a speech prepared about understanding boundaries while maintaining our relationship. Sophie answered the door in her scrubs, clearly exhausted from a night shift. Her hair was pulled back in a messy bun, and there were dark circles under her eyes. "Maggie, this isn't a good time." "I brought some of Lucas's favorite books," I said quickly, holding up the bag. "The ones about the little blue truck. I thought maybe Grandma Maggie." Lucas's voice came from somewhere inside the house, followed by the sound of running feet. Sophie gently but firmly positioned herself in the doorway, blocking his path to me. "Lucas, stay inside, please." I caught a glimpse of him behind her bed hair and dinosaur pajamas, his face lighting up when he saw me. "Grandma, did you bring cookies?" My heart shattered. "Hi, baby. I miss you so much." "Lucas, go find your trucks," Sophie said softly. When he reluctantly disappeared, she turned back to me. "Maggie, I meant what I said. We need time. But he misses me too. You can see that." "I know this is hard. But unannounced visits aren't helping anyone." I drove home with shaking hands, the bag of books still in my passenger seat. The second week brought a new strategy gifts. I spent hours on Amazon, carefully selecting educational toys that even Sophie couldn't object to. Building blocks for spatial development. Art supplies for creativity. Puzzles for problem-solving skills. I had them delivered directly to their house with notes explaining the educational benefits of each item. They all came back. Ryan called the next day. "Mom, Sophie returned the packages to you. They're on your front porch. They're educational toys. How can she object to—" She left a note. "She wants you to respect their decision." I found the note tucked under my doormat, written in Sophie's careful handwriting. "Please respect our decision. We will contact you when we're ready to talk." That's when the anger really set in. The grocery store incident happened during week 3. I was shopping for one at Kroger, feeling sorry for myself as I selected a small container of soup for dinner when I heard a familiar giggle from the next aisle over. I abandoned my cart and followed the sound, my heart pounding. There they were, Sophie pushing a cart with Lucas sitting in the child seat, both of them examining cereal boxes. Grandma Maggie. Lucas spotted me immediately and started bouncing in his seat. "Mommy, it's Grandma Maggie." Before Sophie could react, Lucas had somehow wiggled out of the cart and was running toward me. I dropped to my knees and caught him in a fierce hug, breathing in his familiar scent of Johnson's baby shampoo and graham crackers. "I missed you so much, sweetheart," I whispered into his hair. "I missed you too. Where did you go? Are you coming to my house?" I looked up at Sophie over Lucas's head. Other shoppers were starting to stare. "Please," I mouthed silently. Sophie's expression was pained but resolute. "Come on, Lucas. We need to finish shopping." "But I want to talk to Grandma Maggie." "I know, honey, but we need to go now." As Sophie gently pried Lucas away from me, he started to cry. "I want Grandma Maggie. Why can't she come with us?" I stood in the cereal aisle, watching them walk away, listening to my grandson's confused sobs echo through the store. Other customers gave me sympathetic looks or averted their eyes uncomfortably. I felt humiliated and desperate. That night, I called Ryan in tears. "Can't you talk to your wife? Can't you make her understand that she's hurting Lucas too? Mom, you're putting me in an impossible position. I'm not asking you to choose sides. I'm asking you to think about what's best for your son." "That's exactly what I'm thinking about." His voice was strained. "And right now, what's best for Lucas is peace in his family." My friends at book club were divided. Half of them rallied around me with righteous indignation. "That girl has no respect for elders." declared Betty Morrison. "In my day, daughters-in-law knew their place." But Patty McDonald gently disagreed. "Maybe there's more to this story. Maggie, maybe we're only hearing one side." I didn't want to hear that. I wanted validation for my pain, not questions about my actions. I started checking Sophie's Facebook page obsessively, looking for photos of Lucas. There he was at the zoo with Mrs. Chen, the new babysitter. There he was at a birthday party I hadn't been invited to. There he was, helping Sophie bake cookies, the same activity we used to do together. Life was continuing without me. Valentine's Day pushed me over the edge. I bought Lucas a card with a cartoon dinosaur that said, "Your dino might, Valentine," and gave it to Ryan to deliver. It came back unopened with a note, "Please communicate directly with Ryan about any gifts or messages for Lucas." And that night, I sat in my car in the church parking lot after evening service, sobbing into my steering wheel. Other parishioners walked past my Honda Civic, their conversations about dinner plans and weekend activities floating through my closed windows. I felt utterly alone. At 2 a.m., I sat at my kitchen table with a legal pad, writing an angry letter I would never send. "Sophie, you are destroying a family because of your selfishness and control issues. Lucas needs his grandmother, and you have no right to keep us apart. I was helping you, supporting you, loving your child when you were too busy with work to—" I stopped writing and stared at the harsh words on the page. Even in my pain and anger, I knew this wasn't who I wanted to be. But I didn't know how to be anyone else. For the first time since this nightmare began, I whispered the words I'd been too proud to say. "I don't understand what I did wrong." The intervention came from an unexpected source, Patty McDonald, my dearest friend and the one person brave enough to tell me what I didn't want to hear. It was a cold Thursday morning in February when she called. "Maggie, let's go to breakfast. Bob Evans on High Street. My treat." I almost declined. These days, leaving the house felt like an enormous effort, but Patty had been my anchor since Harold died. And something in her voice told me this wasn't just a social call. We ordered our usual coffee, wheat toast for her, pancakes for me that I wouldn't finish, and made small talk about the weather and church gossip until our food arrived. Then Patty set down her fork and looked at me with the expression I remembered from her teaching days, when she needed to have a difficult conversation with a struggling student. "Maggie, honey, I love you, but we need to talk about what really happened with Sophie and Lucas." I immediately went on the defensive. "I've told you everything. She's being unreasonable and—" "Stop!" Patty's voice was gentle but firm. "I need to tell you something I should have shared weeks ago." She took a deep breath and began to speak about her own daughter-in-law, Maria, and her granddaughter, Carmen, 5 years ago. Patty had found herself in a similar situation, cut off from her granddaughter because of what she now recognized as her own need to control and criticize. "I thought I was helping too," Patty said, stirring sugar into her coffee with deliberate slowness. Maria was young, just 24 when Carmen was born. She didn't know about sleep schedules or feeding techniques, so I stepped in. "That sounds like being a good mother-in-law." That's what I told myself, but I wasn't stepping in to support Maria. I was stepping in to replace her. When Carmen cried, I took her from Maria's arms before she could try to soothe her. When Maria tried a new feeding schedule, I criticized it and imposed my own. When they visited, I rearranged Maria's diaper bag because my way was more organized. I shifted uncomfortably in the vinyl booth. This was starting to sound familiar. The breaking point came when Carmen was 2. She fell and scraped her knee at the playground while Maria was watching her, instead of comforting my daughter-in-law, who was already crying harder than Carmen. I scooped up my granddaughter and said, "This is why we need to be more careful," as if Maria had deliberately let her daughter get hurt. Patty's eyes filled with tears. Maria looked at me and said, I can't do anything right in your eyes, can I? And you know what, Maggie? She was right. I had never once praised her parenting. I had never asked for her opinion. I had never treated her like Carmen's mother. But you were trying to help, I said weakly. No, I wasn't. I was trying to be the mother I thought Carmen deserved, instead of supporting the mother she actually had. Patty reached across the table and took my hand. Maggie, I need to ask you some hard questions, and I need you to really think about the answers. The questions came like gentle arrows, each one finding its mark. Did you ever ask Sophie how she wanted to raise Lucas? When she set boundaries, did you respect them or find ways around them? How do you think it felt when Lucas started questioning her rules because of what you allowed? Did you ever praise Sophie's parenting, or did you only offer criticism and suggestions? With each question, memories surfaced that I'd been pushing away. Sophie's face when I criticized her store-bought pie, the way she stepped back when I took over her kitchen, Lucas saying, "But Grandma lets me," when Sophie tried to enforce her rules. "Oh, God," I whispered. I became my mother-in-law. Harold's mother, Eleanor, had been the bane of my early marriage. Nothing I did was ever good enough for her precious son. She criticized my housekeeping, my cooking, my child-rearing. She would rearrange my cabinets when she visited and give Ryan treats I'd specifically said no to. I spent years feeling inadequate and undermined in my own home. I swore I'd never be like her, I said, tears streaming down my face. But I did the exact same things to Sophie. Patty squeezed my hand. The good news is, it's not too late. Maria and I rebuilt our relationship, but it took work, real work. I had to swallow my pride, admit my mistakes, and learn to see her as Carmen's mother, not as someone who needed my constant supervision. That afternoon, I sat in my living room with my laptop, Googling phrases I'd never thought I'd need daughter-in-law relationships, grandparent boundaries, respecting parents' rules. The articles I found were eye-opening and painful. Forum post after forum post from daughters-in-law. My MIL undermines everything I do. She gives my kids candy after I say no. She acts like I'm just the babysitter for her grandchildren. I feel like a stranger in my own family. Each complaint felt like reading my own behavior described by someone else. The realization was devastating. A week later, Ryan suggested family counseling during our monthly lunch at Panera. "Mom, maybe talking to someone professional would help you understand Sophie's perspective." My initial reaction was defensive. "I don't need therapy. I need my grandson." "Maybe," Ryan said carefully. "This might be the only way to see Lucas again." Dr. Elena Rodriguez's office was in a modern building in Dublin, all clean lines and neutral colors. I sat in her comfortable chair, tissues within reach, and tried to answer her gentle questions. "Tell me about your relationship with Sophie before Lucas was born." The honest answer was uncomfortable. "We never really had one." "What did you think your role would be as a grandmother? To love Lucas, to help Sophie, to be involved? And what did being involved look like to you?" As I described my vision, regular babysitting, planning birthday parties, teaching Lucas family traditions, Dr. Rodriguez listened without judgment, but when she reflected my words back to me, I heard them differently. "It sounds like you saw yourself as a co-parent rather than a grandparent." "I just wanted to help." "I believe that. But did you ever ask Sophie what kind of help she wanted?" The answer was no. I had assumed I knew what she needed because I was the experienced mother. I had never considered that she might have her own ideas about raising her son. "Tell me about Sophie's background." Dr. Rodriguez prompted. I realized I knew embarrassingly little. Sophie's parents had immigrated from China when she was born. They had sacrificed everything for their children's education. Sophie was the first in her family to become a healthcare professional. How do you think she felt when you criticized her parenting choices for the first time? I tried to imagine the situation from Sophie's perspective. A young mother, trying to prove herself in a demanding career, working to honor both her American upbringing and her parents' values, dealing with a mother-in-law who second-guessed every decision. I made her feel like she wasn't good enough, I whispered. What do you think that did to Lucas? The question hit me like a physical blow. It confused him. It made him think his mother's rules didn't matter. I left that first therapy session feeling raw and exposed, but also strangely hopeful. For the first time in months, I had a path forward that didn't involve being right or getting my way. I had to learn to love Lucas by supporting his mother, not by replacing her. The journey would be long and painful. But maybe, just maybe, there was still time to fix what I had broken. Dr. Rodriguez's office became my classroom for the next several months. Each session peeled back another layer of my assumptions and forced me to confront uncomfortable truths about my behavior. Let's talk about cultural differences in parenting, she said during our third session. I shifted in my chair. I don't think this is about culture. It's about what's best for Lucas. According to whom? The question hung in the air. According to me. Obviously. But as Dr. Rodriguez guided me through research about different parenting philosophies, I began to understand how narrow my perspective had been. Sophie's parents had raised their children with high expectations, emphasis on respect for authority, and careful balance between independence and family obligation. In their culture, questioning a parent's decision wasn't seen as healthy independence. It was disrespectful. When I encouraged Lucas to push back against Sophie's rules, I wasn't teaching him to be confident. I was teaching him that his mother's authority didn't matter. Chinese American parents often feel pressure to prove they're raising successful, respectful children. Dr. Rodriguez explained, when Lucas started questioning Sophie's rules because Grandma lets me, how do you think that affected her confidence as a mother? I thought about Sophie's exhausted face, her careful control during our confrontations. She had been trying to maintain authority in her own home while her mother-in-law undermined her at every turn. Dr. Rodriguez assigned me homework that felt humiliating but necessary writing letters I would never send. The first was to Sophie. Dear Sophie, I owe you an apology. I'm not sure I'm brave enough to give. I realize now that every time I criticized your choices, every time I gave Lucas something you'd said no to, every time I offered unsolicited advice, I was telling you that I didn't trust you to raise your own son. I was so focused on being the best grandmother that I forgot you were Lucas's mother. The second letter was to Lucas. My sweet boy. Grandma went away for a while because I needed to learn how to love you better. I thought loving you meant giving you everything you wanted and protecting you from rules I thought were too strict. But I was wrong. Loving you means supporting your mommy and daddy. Even when I disagree with them, it means helping you grow into a respectful, kind person, not just a happy one. The third letter broke my heart to write, Dear Harold, I wish you were here to help me understand what I've done. I became everything I hated about your mother. I know you would be disappointed in how I treated Sophie and confused our grandson. I'm trying to fix it, but I'm scared it might be too late. Learning about boundaries was perhaps the hardest part of therapy. My generation had been raised to believe that family meant unlimited access, that love justified any behavior, that elders deserved automatic respect, regardless of their actions. Boundaries aren't walls, Dr. Rodriguez explained. They're foundations. They make relationships safer, not more distant. She had me practice phrases that felt foreign on my tongue. That's your decision to make. How can I support you? I respect your choice. What would be most helpful? We role-played scenarios where I practiced asking instead of assuming, supporting instead of taking over. It felt awkward and unnatural, like learning a new language in my 60s. I read books, Dr. Sum, Rodriguez recommended Boundaries by Henry Cloud, articles about healthy grandparent relationships, research about different parenting styles. Each page reinforced what I was learning. Love without respect wasn't love at all. The cultural education was perhaps most important. I visited the Chinese Cultural Center in Columbus, attended a lecture about Chinese American family values, and spoke with other multicultural families. I learned about the pressure Sophie faced to raise a child who honored both his Chinese heritage and his American upbringing. I began to understand that when I criticized Sophie's choices, I wasn't just questioning her parenting, I was dismissing her entire cultural background. Month 2 brought deeper work. Dr. Rodriguez helped me address the grief I'd been avoiding since Harold's death. You threw yourself into being a grandmother because it helped you avoid processing your loss. She observed gently. She was right. Caring for Lucas had given me purpose when everything else felt empty. But I had used my grief as an excuse to become overly involved in his life. Lucas became your emotional support system instead of you finding healthy ways to cope with widowhood. The revelation was painful but necessary. I had been using my grandson to fill the hole Harold's death had left, placing an unfair burden on a little boy who needed stable, consistent adults, not someone whose emotional well-being depended on his affection. I joined a grief support group at St. Wag Matthew's Lutheran Church. Listening to other widows share their struggles helped me realize I wasn't alone in my pain, but I was unique in how I'd handled it. I threw myself into my children's lives too, shared Margaret, a 72-year-old who'd lost her husband the year before. But my daughter finally had to tell me that I was trying to make her responsible for my happiness. That's not fair to our children or grandchildren. Dr. Rodriguez assigned me the task of developing my own interests and friendships. I volunteered at the Columbus Metropolitan Library, helping with children's story time. I joined a garden club and learned about perennials that would bloom in my backyard. I took a cooking class focused on healthy meals for one. Slowly, I began to build a life that didn't revolve around my need to be needed. The breakthrough moment came during our 8th session. Dr. Rodriguez asked me to imagine Lucas as an adult, looking back on his childhood. What do you want him to remember about his relationship with you? That I loved him unconditionally, I said immediately. And how do you think he'll remember the conflict between you and his mother? The question stopped me cold. I imagined Lucas at 25, perhaps with children of his own, trying to explain to them why his grandmother and mother had fought when he was young. He'll remember that the adults he loved couldn't get along. I whispered. He'll remember feeling caught in the middle. What kind of love teaches a child that his mother's authority doesn't matter? I finally understood. Real love for Lucas meant creating peace in his family, not winning his affection. It meant supporting his parents' efforts to raise him well, even when I disagreed with their methods. By month 3, I was ready to write the letter that would change everything. Not the angry drafts I'd written in my pain, but a genuine apology that took full responsibility for my actions. Dear Sophie, I've been doing a lot of thinking and growing over these past months. I owe you a sincere apology for my behavior and the pain I've caused your family. I realize now that in my enthusiasm to be a good grandmother, I overstepped important boundaries and undermined your authority as Lucas's mother. When you set rules for Lucas, I should have supported them, not found ways around them. When you made parenting choices, I should have respected them, not criticized them. I was wrong to give Lucas the tablet after you'd said no screens. I was wrong to feed him extra sweets when you were trying to establish healthy eating habits. I was wrong to make comments about your parenting choices. Most importantly, I was wrong to put Ryan in the middle of our conflict. I've been working with a counselor to understand how my actions affected you and your family. I now understand that my behavior made you feel judged, undermined, and disrespected in your own home. That was never my intention, but I take full responsibility for the impact. Sophie, you are a wonderful mother to Lucas. I see how much you love him, how hard you work to provide for him, and how thoughtfully you make decisions about his well-being. You don't need my approval, but you have my respect. I'm not writing this letter to ask for anything. I'm writing it because you deserve an apology, and Lucas deserves adults in his life who can treat each other with kindness and respect. If you're ever willing to talk, I would welcome the opportunity to listen and understand how I can be a better mother-in-law and grandmother. But I understand if you need more time, or if you prefer to keep things as they are. With love and respect, Maggie. I mailed the letter on a rainy Tuesday morning, my hands shaking as I dropped it in the mailbox outside the post office. Then I went home and waited, trying not to hope for too much, but unable to stop hoping entirely. The response came 3 weeks later, not as a letter, but as a text message that made me cry with relief and gratitude. Maggie, thank you for your letter. I would like to talk. Would you be willing to meet for coffee? Just us, Sophie. The Starbucks on High Street had never felt so intimidating. I arrived 15 minutes early, ordered my usual decaf with cream, and chose a table by the window where I could watch for Sophie's car. My hands shook as I stirred sugar into my coffee, and I had to resist the urge to check my appearance in my phone camera for the 3rd time. When Sophie walked through the door, still in her scrubs after a night shift at the hospital, she looked as nervous as I felt. Her hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail, and there were tired lines around her eyes, but she managed a tentative smile when she spotted me. "Thank you for coming," I said as she approached the table, half rising from my chair. "Thank you for writing that letter." She sat down across from me, wrapping her hands around her coffee cup as if she needed the warmth. It meant a lot. For a moment, we just sat there. 2 women who had hurt each other, not sure how to begin healing. "Sophie," I started, then stopped. "I've rehearsed this conversation 100 times, but now I don't know where to start." "Maybe you could start by letting me tell you how I felt," she said quietly. "If you're ready to hear it." I nodded, preparing myself for words I knew would be difficult to hear. "I felt like I could never do anything right around you," Sophie began, her voice barely above a whisper. "Every choice I made as a mother seemed to be wrong in your eyes. When I tried to establish routines or rules, you found ways around them. When I set boundaries about food or screen time, you ignored them." She paused, gathering courage. "The hardest part was when Lucas started questioning my decisions because Grandma lets me. Do you understand what that did to me? I'm already struggling with being a working mom, feeling guilty about the time I spend at the hospital, wondering if I'm doing enough, being enough. And then my own son started doubting my choices because of what you allowed." Each word was like a knife to my heart, but I forced myself to listen without defending, without explaining. "I never wanted to keep Lucas from you," Sophie continued, tears forming in her eyes. "I know how much you love him, but I needed you to respect me as his mother. I needed to feel like I had some authority in my own home." When she finished, we both sat quietly for a moment. I could hear the coffee shop around us, the hiss of the espresso machine, conversations at other tables, the soft jazz playing overhead, but it all felt muted compared to the weight of Sophie's words. "I'm so sorry I made you feel that way," I said finally. "I was so focused on being a good grandmother that I completely forgot you were a person with feelings. I treated you like you were just the person who happened to be married to my son, not like Lucas's mother." Sophie wiped her eyes with a napkin. "I understand that you love Lucas, but love without respect isn't sustainable. It creates chaos instead of security." "I understand that now. I've been working with a therapist to learn about boundaries and different parenting styles. I've learned about your cultural background and how my behavior must have felt like a rejection of your values." Sophie looked surprised. "You've been learning about Chinese parenting." I visited the cultural center, I read about the pressure you face to raise Lucas to be successful and respectful in both cultures. I realized that when I encouraged him to push back against your rules, I wasn't teaching him independence. I was teaching him that his mother's authority didn't matter. For the first time since we'd sat down, Sophie's shoulders relaxed slightly. I also realized, I continued, that I was using my relationship with Lucas to avoid dealing with my grief over Harold's death. That wasn't fair to any of you, especially Lucas. He shouldn't have to be responsible for my emotional well-being. Sophie reached across the table and touched my hand briefly. I know you miss Harold, and I know Lucas brings you joy. I never wanted to take that away from you. But you needed me to step back so you could be his mother. Yes. We sat in silence again, but this time it felt less painful and more hopeful. Sophie, I said carefully, I understand if you can't trust me yet. I understand if you need more time. But if you're willing to consider it, I'd like to try again. With your rules, your boundaries, your decisions, I want to learn how to be the grandmother Lucas needs and the mother-in-law you deserve. Sophie studied my face for a long moment. What would that look like? I don't know yet, but I'd like you to tell me. What would make you feel supported instead of undermined? What kind of relationship would work for your family? You really want to know. I really want to know. Sophie took a deep breath. I'd need you to ask before giving Lucas any gifts. I'd need you to support my rules even when you disagree with them. I'd need you to trust that I'm making good decisions for my son, even if they're different from the decisions you would make. Those seem like reasonable requests. And I'd need to start slowly. Maybe a phone call with Lucas first, then maybe a short visit with Ryan and me present. I'd need to see that you can respect our boundaries before we move back to more involved relationships. Whatever you think is best, it's your decision to make. Sophie's eyes widened slightly. That's exactly what Dr. Rodriguez taught me to say, isn't it? I laughed, a real laugh for the first time in months. She's very good at her job. Would you like to call Lucas tomorrow around 4, after his nap? My heart leaped. I would love that more than anything. As we prepared to leave, Sophie hesitated. Maggie, I want you to know that I've missed having you in our lives too. Lucas asks about you all the time, and I could use more support. Not less. I just needed to know that you saw me as his mother. I do see that now. And Sophie, you're a wonderful mother. Lucas is lucky to have you, too. And walking to our cars, both of us crying and smiling at the same time, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months, hope. Not hope that I could go back to the way things were, but hope that we could build something better, a relationship based on respect and support instead of control and criticism. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but for the first time since that terrible phone call in January, I believed we could find our way back to each other. The phone call with Lucas was scheduled for Thursday at 4 o'clock. I spent the morning cleaning my house and the afternoon pacing, checking the clock every 5 minutes. When my phone finally rang at exactly 4:40 p.m., my hands were shaking as I answered. Grandma Maggie! Lucas's voice burst through the speaker, filled with excitement and confusion. Where did you go? Mommy said you were learning something. My throat tightened with emotion. Hi, sweetheart. Grandma was learning how to be better. I missed you so much. I missed you too. Guess what? I lost a tooth. For 15 precious minutes, we talked about his loose tooth, his new favorite book about construction trucks, and a funny thing that happened at preschool. I resisted the urge to promise gifts or special treats, instead just focusing on listening to his sweet voice and laughing at his 4-year-old observations about the world. When Sophie got back on the phone to say goodbye, she sounded relieved. That went well. He's been asking about you every day. Thank you for letting me talk to him. It means everything. We'll try again next week. Each phone call became a little easier, a little longer. Lucas would tell me about his day, and I would tell him about mine, my volunteer work at the library, the flowers blooming in my garden, the cardinals nesting outside my kitchen window. I learned to show interest without trying to compete with his parents' activities. 3 weeks later, Sophie called with an invitation that made my heart race. "Would you like to come for Easter dinner? Just for a few hours, with Ryan and me there." I arrived at their Westerville home on Easter Sunday with an approved gift books Sophie had specifically requested, and my heart full of nervous energy. Lucas met me at the door, shy at first, but gradually warming up as we looked at the new books together. The afternoon was careful and tentative. When Lucas threw a tantrum about eating his vegetables, I watched Sophie handle it with calm firmness and found myself genuinely admiring her approach rather than wanting to intervene. When he asked for a second cookie after dinner, I automatically looked to Sophie for guidance instead of making the decision myself. "What do you think, Mommy?" I said when Lucas asked me directly. Sophie looked surprised but pleased. "One more cookie is fine, but then we brush teeth." The moment Lucas fell asleep on my lap during a Disney movie felt like a gift I hadn't dared hope for. His warm weight against my chest, his steady breathing, the trust implicit in his relaxed surrender to sleep. I had missed this so desperately. "He's missed this too," Sophie said softly, noticing my tears. The breakthrough moment came a month later when Lucas got sick with a fever. Sophie called me, her voice strained with exhaustion. "Maggie, I know this is a lot to ask, but could you help? Lucas has been up all night with a fever, and I have to work. We're understaffed again. Ryan's traveling for work, and Mrs. Chen can't come because her husband is having surgery." "Of course. What do you need me to do?" Sophie gave me detailed instructions which medicine to give him and when, what foods he could have, what activities might help him feel better. I followed every instruction exactly, texting her updates throughout the day and calling when his fever spiked. When Sophie came home that evening, she found Lucas sleeping peacefully on my lap while I read quietly. His fever had broken, and he'd eaten some soup and crackers. "Thank you," she said, and I could hear the relief and gratitude in her voice. "You took such good care of him. I just followed your instructions. But you could have done it your way. You could have given him extra treats or let him watch more TV than I said. You didn't, because you're his mother, and you know what's best for him." That night, Sophie sent me a text that made me cry. "Thank you for respecting my decisions today. It means more than you know." Our relationship began to change in ways I hadn't expected. Sophie started calling me just to chat, sharing stories about difficult cases at the hospital and asking for advice about managing work stress. I found myself genuinely interested in her life beyond her role as Lucas's mother. We discovered shared interests. Both of us loved true crime podcasts and the Great British Baking Show. Sophie asked for my chocolate chip cookie recipe, and I offered to teach her my technique for getting them perfectly chewy. Ryan noticed the change immediately. "Mom, thank you for doing the work to fix this. Our family dinners actually feel peaceful again." "I should have done it sooner." "The important thing is, you did it at all. Not everyone would have been willing to change." 6 months after our coffee shop conversation, Sophie asked me something that felt like the ultimate sign of trust restored. "Maggie, would you be able to babysit Lucas Saturday night? Ryan and I haven't been on a date in months." I arrived at their house with my emergency contact list, Sophie's detailed instructions, and a heart full of gratitude. Lucas and I had a wonderful evening. We played with his trains, read stories, and I followed Sophie's bedtime routine exactly. When his parents came home, they found their son sleeping peacefully and their house clean. "How did it go?" Sophie asked, slipping off her heels. "Perfect. He brushed his teeth without arguing, went to bed on time, and only needed one extra story. And you stuck to the routine. Every detail, your house, your rules. Remember." Sophie smiled a real, relaxed smile that reached her eyes. "Thank you for tonight and for everything, for changing, for learning, for becoming the grandmother Lucas needs. That night, driving home through the quiet Columbus suburbs, I reflected on how much had changed. I was still Lucas's grandmother, but now I was also Sophie's ally instead of her adversary. I had learned that love without respect wasn't sustainable, that boundaries weren't barriers, but foundations, that supporting wasn't the same as controlling. The grandmother I had become was different from the one I'd started as, but she was better. She was someone who could love Lucas by supporting his parents, who could be part of his life without dominating it, who could add to his security instead of creating chaos. I had learned that sometimes the greatest act of love is learning when to step back so others can step up. And if you're very lucky and very brave, you get a chance to step back in the right way this time. 6 months later, I stand in Sophie and Ryan's kitchen, helping prepare for Lucas's 5th birthday party, not taking over, not rearranging everything to my preferences, but actually helping following Sophie's plan, supporting her vision, adding my efforts to hers, instead of competing with them. "Can you put the dinosaur plates at each place setting?" Sophie asks, checking items off her carefully organized list. "Absolutely. Do you want the cups to the right or left of the plates?" "Right is perfect. Thank you." Such a simple exchange, but it represents everything that's changed between us. I ask instead of assuming. She includes me instead of working around me. We're partners in making Lucas happy instead of competitors for his affection. Lucas races through the house in his new dinosaur shirt, a gift Sophie specifically requested I buy his excitement infectious. When he sees me arranging the plates, he grins and runs over for a hug. "Grandma Maggie, are you staying for my whole party?" "If your mommy says it's okay," he looks to Sophie automatically now, understanding that she's the decision maker. "Mommy, can Grandma Maggie stay for my whole party?" "Of course, sweetheart. Grandma Maggie helped plan it?" The party is a success not because everything goes perfectly, but because all the adults work together to create joy for Lucas. When he gets overwhelmed by too much stimulation and starts to melt down, I watch Sophie handle it with patience and skill, offering support when she needs it, but letting her lead. "You handled that beautifully," I tell her when Lucas has calmed down. "Thanks. It helps to have backup instead of criticism." The grandmother I've become is fundamentally different from the one I was a year ago. Instead of trying to be Lucas's favorite adult, I focus on being another adult who loves him enough to support his parents' efforts. Instead of competing with Sophie, I look for ways to make her job easier. Instead of assuming I know best, I ask questions and listen to answers. This transformation has had ripple effects throughout our family. Ryan no longer walks on eggshells, worried about mediating between his wife and mother. Lucas feels secure because the adults in his life work together instead of against each other. Sophie has the support she needs to be confident in her parenting. And me, I've discovered that being respected is actually more fulfilling than being indulged. The relationship I have with Lucas now is deeper and more meaningful because it's not threatened by underlying conflict. He trusts me because I support his parents, not despite it. My friendship with Sophie has become one of the unexpected gifts of this journey. We meet for coffee every Tuesday now, sharing stories about our weeks, talking through challenges, supporting each other through difficult times. When she had a particularly traumatic case at the hospital, a child who didn't make it, I was one of the first people she called. "I keep thinking about his grandmother," she said, crying into her coffee. "How do you survive losing someone you love that much?" I thought about Harold, about the grief that had nearly consumed me. "You survive by leaning on people who love you, by letting them help carry the weight until you're strong enough to carry it yourself. Is that what you're doing for me? Helping carry the weight?" It's what families do for each other. Through my book club, my grief support group, and my volunteer work at the library, I've shared my story with other grandmothers facing similar challenges. The advice I give them comes from hard-won wisdom. Your grandchild's mother isn't your enemy. She's doing the hardest job in the world, and she deserves your support. not your criticism. Your experience is valuable, but it doesn't make you the authority in someone else's home. Your relationship with your grandchild is precious, but it shouldn't come at the cost of undermining their parents. Last month, I spoke at a grandparenting support group at the community center. 15 women, all struggling with difficult relationships with their daughters-in-law, all convinced they were the victims of unreasonable younger women. The hardest thing I ever did was admit I was wrong, I told them, but it saved my family. One woman, about my age, raised her hand. But what if the daughter-in-law really is being unreasonable? What if she really is keeping the grandchildren away for no good reason? I recognized my old self in her voice, the defensive certainty that the problem lay entirely with someone else. I thought that too, I said gently. I was convinced Sophie was being controlling and vindictive. It took months of therapy for me to see that I was the one being unreasonable, that I was the one creating the problems I was complaining about. So you're saying it's always the grandmother's fault? I'm saying it's usually more complicated than we want to admit, and the only person you can control is yourself. So start there. Writing in my journal has become a therapeutic practice. Last week, I wrote a letter to future grandmothers who might read my story. To any grandmother reading this who might be struggling with her daughter-in-law, your grandchild's mother isn't your enemy. She's doing the hardest job in the world raising a human being, and she deserves your support, not your criticism. Your experience raising children is valuable, but it doesn't make you the authority in someone else's home. Times change, knowledge grows, and every family gets to make their own choices. Your relationship with your grandchild is precious, but it shouldn't come at the cost of undermining their parents. Children need security, consistency, and adults who work together, not compete for their affection. Swallow your pride. Apologize when you're wrong. Listen more than you speak. Ask, how can I help, instead of, why don't you try? Your grandchild doesn't need you to be their favorite adult. They need you to be another adult who loves them enough to support their parents' efforts to raise them well. The love you'll receive in return from your grandchild, your adult child, and yes, even your daughter-in-law will be deeper and more meaningful than any temporary victory you might win by getting your way. Trust me, I almost lost everything I cared about because I couldn't see past my own need to be needed. Don't make my mistakes. There's still time to choose love over pride. This afternoon, as I sit in my living room looking at the photographs on my mantel, I see the visual story of our family's healing. The pictures now include Sophie and show genuine smiles all around. Lucas's artwork decorates my refrigerator with notes that say, "I love you, Grandma Maggie," in his careful 5-year-old handwriting. Harold's picture still holds the place of honor on the mantel, and sometimes I imagine what he would say about this journey. I think he would be proud of my willingness to change, to grow, to admit when I was wrong. "Well done, Maggie." I can almost hear him saying, "Well done." The phone rings, interrupting my reverie. Sophie's name appears on the caller ID, and I answer with a smile. "Hi, Sophie. How was your day?" "Busy, but good. I have some news I wanted to share with you." "Oh, I'm pregnant again." My heart fills with joy and something else, anticipation mixed with determination. "That's wonderful news. How are you feeling?" "Tired, but excited." "And Maggie, I was hoping you'd want to be involved from the beginning this time. Really involved, as the grandmother Lucas's sibling deserves." Tears fill my eyes. I would be honored, and this time, I'll know how to do it right. We'll figure it out together. As I hang up the phone, I think about the grandmother I'll be to this new baby. She'll be someone who asks before giving gifts, who supports parenting decisions even when she disagrees, who builds up the parents instead of tearing them down. She'll be someone who loves by supporting, not by taking over. The wisdom I've gained through this painful journey feels hard-won, but precious. True love sometimes means stepping back. Relationships are built on respect, not just affection. Being wrong doesn't make you a bad person. Refusing to grow does. The best gift you can give your grandchild is peace in their family. It's never too late to change, learn, and love better. I prepare for another family dinner tonight, this time as a true partner in raising Lucas and soon-to-be partner in raising his sibling. I'm looking forward to meeting my second grandchild as the grandmother I was meant to be, one who loves by supporting, not by taking over. Sometimes the greatest act of love is learning when to step back so others can step up. And sometimes, if you're very lucky and very brave, you get a chance to step back in the right way this time. The house that once felt too quiet now feels peaceful. Tomorrow I'll call Lucas, and we'll talk about becoming a big brother. On Thursday, I'll babysit while Sophie goes to a doctor's appointment. On Sunday, we'll have family dinner where I'll contribute my famous snickerdoodles and my newfound ability to support instead of control. It's a good life, not the one I thought I wanted, but the one we all needed. And it's built on the strongest foundation of all love that respects, supports, and endures.